Hello, and welcome to another episode of Think Tank Theater. I'm your host, Daniel Narotsky, and today we're going to be talking about wavelengths and frequencies. We're going to be talking about digital enhanced cordless telephony. We're going to be talking about DECT. And joining me today is industry expert and leader in this technology, Simon Bradbrook from Snom.
Good morning, Daniel, and thanks for inviting me along to this session. And a
Simon,
happy new year to you too.
Happy New Year to you as well. So, Simon, tell us a little bit about your role there with Snom.
Okay, yeah, sure. So I'm the senior sales engineer with Snow, basically working very closely with our sales team. I'm the guy that's brought in when we need the sales team needs some technical advice. And as I like to joke, it's I'm the guy, or it's my team, that get called upon to keep the sales team honest.
Very good. Well, today we're going to be talking about DECT, and we know Snom is one of the leaders in this technology, has been around the technology for a long time. But before we jump right into what DECT is, let's talk about how we got here. With cordless telephony. I know back in the late 80s, early 90s, we had these cordless telephones that had the glorious telescoping antenna. You would zip it out and walk maybe 30, 40 feet away, and we thought that was great.
That's right. Whip it out, poke somebody eye with that antenna that used to come out the top of the headset. Correct. But you're right. I mean, it was like groundbreaking at the time. It was a total game changer. Is like how telephony could be used. And it actually is just one of the things I wanted to bring up as well. With Snom. Back in 2016, Snom was acquired by VTech. And now VTech, if anyone with children out there, you probably know VTech. Anyone still has a home phone, you probably know VTech, because one of the largest manufacturers in this division. And what made the marriage, if you like, between Snom and VTech so good was that back in the early late 70s, it was VTech were actually one of the pioneers of the DECT technology. We're bringing that together with the experience that Snom had in the SIP world with the SIP stack, and combining the two strengths has allowed us to kind of create a product line that makes us stand out a little bit from the others. The history of VTech there, obviously, with people that know the company also know that we had the hotel room phones, and we were coming out with both DECT and SIP solutions for that, and both actually supported the DECT protocol. So we'd already made transitions into the IP world with DECT. It was just that the merger with Snom allowed us to bring in a more secure SIP stack, so it made the user quality that much better.
So we've taken that technology from that old wireless 900 megahertz that we were talking about with that telescoping antenna. We've pushed through the initial digital cordless technologies. We were in 2.4 gigahertz and 5.8 gigahertz. And so the general progression, if you were thinking of this, even in the VTech days of old analog telephony, you had 900 megahertz and then 2.4 gigahertz, which would be 2,400 megahertz. Mm-hmm. And then 5.8, you would think the next thing we're going to had to be in the 6,000s. And so a great marketing ploy when DECT first came out, they called it DECT 6.0.
I do remember that, yeah.
And we had to explain to everybody, no, it's not 6 gigahertz. It was 1.9. And so 1.9. Let's talk about that just for a minute. Give me your advice on the marketing ploy behind it, but really more importantly for today's listeners, why did we go to a 1.9 gigahertz frequency?
Well, it's simple, really, because it's a unique frequency to the DECT protocol. And it's not just unique in just the DECT, it's each region has their own frequency, which makes it unique. Like if you get into Europe, it's 1.8. So using those two examples there, it's country specific. Anything that we send from our factories, depending on the country it goes to, if it's DECT, it has to meet that specific requirement for that region. Where it's good, where it really makes the difference is it's unique to that product. Nobody else, no other wireless product out there is going to interfere with it.
Yeah, and that's a great segue of with 1.9 gigahertz. Why use that? Why use DECT now in these products? And you hit it on the head. It is specific to that frequency for telephony. We're not having interference with Wi-Fi anymore. When Wi-Fi first came out, it was running on that same 2.4 and 5.8 frequency, which now has its own segment to run and play on. We don't have radio wave interference anymore. So that voice frequency only of 1.9 or 1.8 in Europe or any other region that we're on has really given us the voice only frequency that we're not having the interference with. We can actually put a lot more units in one location now. You know, I remember in earlier wireless headset days, you could only have maybe 10 wireless headsets in a given area because you would have that frequency overload.
That's correct, yeah.
But now DECT allows you for that high density.
Yeah, you got the higher density. Also, you know, obviously there's always a limit to that density. So, you know,
Sure.
you know, if you overload a specific area with, like, you know, a lots of DECT signaling, then you could end up in issues. But managed correctly, spread out, you're absolutely correct. There's nothing else out there that's going to interfere with that frequency, which makes it completely unique. And also adds to the security of the product. You know, and so one of the things I often get asked about, you know, with desk phones and with Wi-Fi phones, it's like the security around that. The beauty of DECT is it's a protocol that was written for voice. It's only for voice. And therefore, you've already got the built-in security there that other protocols add on top of that.
Well, in some of my previous episodes, security has been a very important issue. And so let's touch on that for a second. What are some of the other security pieces that are embedded into DECT?
Well, it's again, it goes back to that specific frequency. It's only a DECT product that can work within that. The radios between the receivers and the antennas is basically it's almost like a line of sight signal, and nothing else can interfere with that. Which, like I said, it's a protocol written for voice. You don't. There's automatic built-in security because nothing else can break into that frequency. So what else? I mean, really, that is it. There are no other protocols that sit in there that help it. I mean, obviously, you can secure your network with TLS 1.2, and they'll sit on top of that, but it won't interfere and it won't affect. It will just add to the effectiveness of the security that's already there.
So the security was there when it was a DECT analog device, but now we're talking about IP DECT. And that's where you mentioned adding TLS in there, some further network security, and that goes into some of the previous discussions we've had on previous episodes with network security. So outside of security being a voice only frequency, what are some other reasons that people would want to use DECT as a cordless technology?
Okay, so aside from security, you've got your there's a fixed range, and what fixed range means is that it's line of sight from the antenna to the handset. The range being on average about 500 feet line of sight, depending on the building you're in. And then that gives you sort of around about 2,500 square feet per base to handset. With the fixed range, it also allows for better battery life. Often with a Wi-Fi device, it's constantly pinging the network. It's looking, there's a keep alive signal going on constantly. With the DECT device, because it's paired only to that base or only within a multi-cell network, its only signaling point is back to the base. So that only comes alive when there's a call made between base or handset. So the handsets themselves, the batteries will actually go into a sleep mode when they're not in use, which gives you much greater battery life. It's, it's like I said, with a DECT device, you're constantly pinging backwards and forwards with the network.
So you mentioned something there. Let's touch on that briefly. The base, traditional base that's connecting to your IP network, reaches out to a handset. I think most people understand that scenario. That just kind of goes back into what we've all been used to. But you mentioned a multi-cell scenario. Let's talk about a difference in why you would need a multi-cell scenario versus multiple bases and handsets.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we do actually build a multi-cell product. It's in Snom. It's called the M900, and it's targeted. It's a true enterprise product. It's scalable from one base station and 30 handsets up to 1,000 base stations. 4,000 handsets. So it's a true, because it's built with DECT, it's a true voice solution for the enterprise. Where we're seeing success with it is hospitals, assisted living facilities. I also see a place for this in like large sports arenas, large conference centers where the staff need to be mobile, but they need a communication device. You often see people walk around with walkie-talkies. Well, with the multi-cell product we have, it will support that push-to-talk functionality of a walkie-talkie, but it also allows the user to continue to make calls.
So the multi-cell takes the fixed range that we talked about earlier from base to handset, but because now you're in multi-cell scenario, you have the different cells that is just continuing to push and repeat this signal through the environment. So you're really taking that fixed range and extending it.
Exactly. That's exactly what we do. You know, as obviously there's a lot more to it than what we're talking about, but it's a reasonably simple installation in the fact that you can measure the frequencies of the handset to the base, and there's a cutoff point. What you want to do is actually cross that signal over. So base 1 to base 2, the signal crosses slightly. And what that does is it secures the network so that when you walk through from zone to zone, there's no issue with handoff. It's seamless to the user. So what you in effect end up doing is creating a mesh network of DECT signals so that the handsets can roam anywhere within that building, and they're constantly going to be connected to a base station.
Yeah, and like you said, it is a little more complex than just extending it. We do, like you said, it's fixed range, but it's a fixed number of handsets to base. So you really do have to plan it out, see how many handsets are going to be in that zone connected to bases. But when planned out well, it's a really dynamic solution.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, there's lots of things as well. You know, any wireless installation, the success of that install is going to be the site survey. You need to understand how strong your signaling is all over the building. And you know, there's devices out there like spectrum analyzers, but they're not cheap. You know, you're talking about a $30,000 piece of equipment there to measure the frequency in the air. We actually give you that ability in the handsets. So we provide you that, so you can do your own site survey using the exact equipment, and it allows you to plan the building location out, and you can pinpoint exactly where you're going to need a land drop for the next base station, which gives you the success, you know, that you need for the wireless installation.
Absolutely. And in a multi-cell network, for users that maybe haven't had the experience with that in the past, you know, I know some of our listeners have had experience that with the old TDM systems that had a multi-cell solution. But for those that aren't familiar with it, what all is entailed in the multi-cell solution? You're going to have a base connected to your network, and that's going to bring your primary IP signaling and registration in. But what about each one of the other cells? What does that look like with Snom?
Well, here's the one thing that we actually do, which is a little unique to other manufacturers that have gone into the multi-cell market. We don't require multiple bases to triangulate. We basically, everything's built off of the first base station. So the first base station, or the primary base station, is the one that has all the provisioning inside it. Then you basically, in the interface of the product, you just enable what we call multi-cell, and you set your signaling methods within that. And then basically, as you add different base stations, they talk to each other through multicast. So they instantly identify each other. So as they come online, you can actually see it. We have a DECT tree. You see the primary sitting at the top, and then you see all the other base stations sitting there below it. Not only that, it also tells you which base station they're syncing from, because they all need to sync from each other. So obviously, the base station that's 10,000 meters away from the primary base station is not going to be syncing directly from the primary. It's going to be syncing from a secondary unit that's there. And all this information is actually laid out for you as you start to build out the multi-cell network.
It's a great solution. And so the key here is plan and design.
Any wireless installation, as I keep saying to people, it's only as good as the site survey is. You know, adding stuff afterwards is always tricky. It can be done, but it's better to do it ahead of time, because then you can install the unit and walk away because you know it's going to work.
And one other thing you had mentioned, this is what I hear a lot in the industry and on phone calls that I get on, whether it's helping someone consult with their initial design or even post installation. The difference between DECT and Wi-Fi.
I'm not against Wi-Fi. I see it as an easy
Sure.
solution for certain people. There's simplicity versus complexity. There's cost effectiveness versus return on investment and integration. Now, so you look at a Wi-Fi network and you think, oh, I can have a handset that's just going to connect into my Wi-Fi network automatically. And yeah, you can wander around. But the difference being is with the DECT multi-cell solutions, you're actually building a mesh network of signaling that's going to secure that signal so that you've got true voice quality. With the Wi-Fi network, you're dealing with, unless your network administrator's installed it properly, you're going to be dealing with prioritization of voice over data, because voice needs to come in front of data. So if it's not configured correctly, that could run, you're going to run into issues. Not only that, you do get dark spots, if you like, where the signal is not as strong. With the DECT solutions, you can close that in. You can put multiple units in that area, which are going to make that unit true. Whereas with the Wi-Fi networks, you can't do that as easily. The handoff capability as well as you roam around. When it's data, there's not a problem. But with the voice, you have to make sure it's secure. And that would be, for me, the biggest issue, if you like, with a Wi-Fi network over a DECT network.
The packet prioritization is very important when you're dealing with Wi-Fi. And I know I've had those conversations. You have to prioritize it at the radio, but you also have to prioritize it at the network level as well for a Wi-Fi installation to be designed well. Again, it does go back to what we said. It's designing and planning. And that's key in any wireless technology, whether it's DECT or Wi-Fi. But the key here is we're looking at a DECT solution to a Wi-Fi solution. One of the things we talked about battery life. It seems like you're going to get a much longer battery life and usage, talk time out of the DECT device.
Yeah.
Security is always something that comes up in all of our episodes. It comes up on every phone call I'm on. In general, with IP telephony in general, what's the best solution? Do you create your own network, or do you piggyback it onto the existing LAN? Right. And so that's kind of a general question we get all the time. And the answer is it's whatever that admin wants to do. There's a lot of companies that don't want something on their network. So they want to have an existing data network and a separate voice network. But with DECT, it's essentially what you're doing. You're keeping the wireless piece of it separate. And then the network part of it, again, goes back to that. Are you connecting to their data network, or is it a separate network? But the wireless solution, it is separate when it's DECT.
Yeah. One of the questions I often get asked, or one of the points that's often made to me is, why do I want to build a separate network when I've already got one existing network? But the beauty of, especially with the IP world, is that you've got a base station that just adds onto the existing IP network. But it's the wireless signaling that creates the network. It's not like you have to build another network. It's just a case of placing everything in the right location, which locks in that signal. And then it's this invisible mesh network that you've created that secures the voice quality and the security of it all.
One of the other things I look at is, as we compare DECT and Wi-Fi, not just talking about the cordless phones, the stuff that you can roam with, but even the desk phones today. We are seeing desk phones that are either using a Wi-Fi network on the phone or a DECT network built into the phone. So let's talk about that and the approach that Snom has taken.
Okay, so we actually do have a product that specializes in this segment. It's called the M500. It's new. It's been out just over a year now. And it brings a lot of differentiators to the DECT market. A certain generation is going to remember the term for key system. Well, one of the things that we do with our M500 is we actually emulate a key system network. And we give it to you on our M58 desk set, which we've deliberately designed to look and feel like an actual SIP desk set, but it's not. It's a DECT device, and all it needs is power, and it's the radio signaling that connects you. By default, the first account will support key system emulation. So it's the old-fashioned You've got the one number for the company, you call in, somebody answers, oh, it's for, they want to speak to Joe in parts. You can page out, then using the phone, you can just actually page in the built-in multicast paging to tell Joe to pick up line 1. But we've also, taken into a fact that the average office size now, probably 20 seats, maybe up to 25. With the DECT solution that we've actually built, you can actually have up to 16 handsets that run off of two base stations, which will secure an area of about 5,000 to 6,000 square feet. The desk set, as I said, has been made to look and feel like it is an actual SIP desk set, and you can provision it like that as well. So you can have a scenario where each desk set has its own line of service, but basically it's a wireless solution. So that saves the cost for the installer on the cable drops. They're not having to run cable. It's basically there's a cable goes to the main base station. Everything else is connecting back wirelessly. So it allows for that wireless office in a box that I think, a lot of people talk about. Not many manufacturers have actually been able to produce that. And I think we really have done that here. We've given you we've gone back to an old fashioned system, key system, where you still got an awful lot of those Centrex users out there still on copper. And to me, this is the baby steps to get them off of copper and into the IP world. Because one of the complaints we often hear is it's I don't want to learn how to call park. I just want to actually place a call on hold and say to somebody, pick that line up. So we've given them that ability.
Two major things that I see with that M500 that you're talking about. The key system emulation is huge. Anybody that's had the key systems in the past and has made the jump to a local premise PBX has felt that change, that things don't work the way it used to, and they've had to learn how to use SIP technology because it's different. But what you're doing is you're giving them that SIP technology, but with the feel of that key system that they've been used to using. And so that's huge. The second thing that I see is you didn't mention it in the cost savings piece, but there's cost savings on the land drops because you're not needing as many in this DECT environment. But the other thing that's important is upon registration on some cloud PBXs, they look at that DECT base as one registration. And that's the registration that is managed between the cloud provider and the local parts shop. And everything else is wirelessly on the DECT network. So it's a lower cost in many instances where they're now only having one or two SIP devices to that cloud, and everything else is now managed wirelessly on the DECT network. Whereas in a different scenario, if you were running Wi-Fi phones, that would be a registration for every device because they would all have their own unique MAC to phone home to that cloud premise PBX. So you have a much higher cost savings on a DECT solution over a Wi-Fi solution in that scenario.
I've got a good statistic there. We had a restaurant chain in North America, 450 stores across the country. They went with the predecessor of the M500, the M100, and it was a restaurant solution. So each site had 3 handsets. So that was 3 POTS lines coming in to share calls. So with the 3 POTS lines at each one of the 450 locations, they went in with the M100 wireless solution, which was basically one hosted account and 3 handsets sharing that hosted account with the key system functionality built in. Infrastructure costs for the restaurant chain alone, they saved over $1 million in the first year because they weren't paying out all that expensive for the POTS lines. So yeah, we've provided an up-to-date solution, given them the same functionality they already had, but at a fraction of the cost that they've had to outlay for their operating costs throughout the year.
So there are a lot of reasons to look at that as a cost savings overall for both the infrastructure and the operating expenses.
One of the other areas I really like as well is we use a pizza shop as an example. You've got a high turnover of staff. You don't want to have to train everyone you employ how to use a phone. It's just a communication device. It should be simple. So with this key system functionality on the wireless devices, it's a bit of a no-brainer, because it's like they don't have to try and transfer the call. The call comes in, they say pick up line 1. It really is that simple. One of the other areas that I said before, we talked about the assisted living. We made sure that we invested the time to actually work with all the nurse call providers, because there's a big thing in the healthcare and the assisted living vertical. The phones will actually support the text messaging that comes through for the alerts. It does text to voice. It does responds to SMS messaging. So again, it's a critical operation for hospitals, for assisted living, and we've just made it seamless by integrating with the nurse call providers. It's one of those solutions that can be installed, and then once it's installed, the installer can actually comfortably walk away in the knowledge that they know the product's going to keep working.
And that's on the M900, a multi-cell.
Yeah.
What about an M500? What do you see as a good use case scenario for that?
Well, I see two good use case scenarios. I mean, we talked about the restaurant and the retail world. I think that's a perfect solution for that. The one hosted line of service coming in, portable devices with line keys on them, so they can actually support that key system emulation. And then again, as we touched on before, the wireless office in a box scenario, when you think, you can go up to 20 users in a small office, and it's low cost. It's not like they've got to run cabling for, an IP phone. It's basically the one land drop, and then you're going to support 10 handsets in a single cell scenario. In a dual cell scenario, you're going to support up to 16 handsets or desk sets. And instead of making it multi-cell, when it's a desk set, that's a fixed signal. It's not like a cordless handset where you're roaming about the building.
Right.
So because it's a fixed signal, what they're looking at is installing separate base stations on separate floors. They're all connected to the same cloud solution, but they're different base stations, and different base stations support different handsets on different floors. So again, you can go past the fact that you're limited to 2 base stations with a dual cell network, and you can actually expand that. You could have 8 floors with only 1 base station on each floor, which is going to actually provide service to the 10 people that actually live on each floor.
That's a great solution too. And I've seen that use case when we've had customers calling in for that design service. So putting one on each floor just to give that fixed range for those corded handsets that are just going to live on the desk. They're not going to be mobile. Glad you brought that up. That's a good point too. And anything else that you want to talk about as we close today and close this episode out?
It's just that our DECT solutions give us a bit of differentiality between everything. A desk set is a desk set is a desk set. But with the M500 solution, now you've got a desk set, and that's something different. That enables you to maybe try out a solution somewhere where you didn't think you had a solution before.
Yeah. So if you've heard this today and you have some questions about DECT, look into the Snom products, the M500 for their DECT key system emulation, the M900 for their multi-cell larger installation. But give them a shout. Feel free to reach out to me, reply to this broadcast, and we'll definitely put you in touch with a rep to get some more information about it. But Simon, thank you again for joining me today, enlightening us on this wireless technology that we've had in front of us for quite a while. But thank you again for giving us some more detailed information on how it's used today.
Oh, you're welcome, Daniel. I really appreciate being invited on today.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Stay up to date on all things Think Tank Theater by following Daniel Narotsky on LinkedIn and subscribing on YouTube. Thanks for watching.